Special Operations 1 and 2 are expansion packs for 1991's Space Simulator Classic Wing Commander 2, offering additional content for players who wanted more after completing the base game. But hold on, how did we get here? Well, it all started in 1990, before the original Wing Commander was even finished. Developer Origin Systems had already begun brainstorming ways to monetize it beyond the initial release. A sequel? Well, that's obvious, but why stop there? Plans were made to offer a mail-order only special edition of the original game with exclusive extra missions utilizing assets that were created for the game but couldn't be included due to storage space limitations. However, series creator Chris Roberts felt that this was unfair to regular customers who might not know anything about some ephemeral catalog or could be unwilling to pay for an extra expensive version of a game they might have already bought and pushed for a retail release. The idea of a so-called expansion pack that required a base game to work but was sold at a lower price to compensate wasn't exactly new. Board games had been doing it since at least the 1970s, and even some video game developers, such as Nihon Falcom, had tried their hand at it in the 80s. But in North America, conventional wisdom saw this idea as a non-starter. You're going to limit the potential customers to people who already bought the base game and charge less? That'll never work. Wing Commander: The Secret Missions flew in the face of conventional wisdom. Tying yourself to a base game might limit the potential audience by a bit, but it also limits development costs by a lot, substantially lowering the number of copies that need to be sold in order to break even. Secret Missions didn't just break even though. According to Roberts, it was expected to sell around 10,000 copies, but ended up breaking 400,000. Players of Wing Commander were hungry for more. So it turned out having something for them to buy mere months later, and for cheap, was a winning combination. All this success did not go unnoticed. Other devs decided to give this whole expansion pack thing a try, and it caught on, creating a vibrant tradition that lasted well into the 2000s before evolving into something we don't need to talk about. I'm in a good mood right now, let's not. Origin themselves were quick to capitalize on this trend they had just started, following up with a more ambitious Secret Missions 2. And by the time we roll around to Wing Commander 2, plans to repeat this formula were baked in from the start. Which brings us back to the subjects of this video, Special Operations 1 and 2. Before we go any further though, I think it's important to let you know that in much the same way that these expansion packs were not made to be played by anyone who didn't already play the base game, this video, due to the circumstances of its creation, assumes a decent amount of familiarity with Wing Commander 2. I'll do my best to provide context where it's expedient, but if you don't know your Dralthies from your Drockeries or your Sarthas from your Salthies, you might be in for some chop. If that is you, do not worry because, buddy, do I have the video for you. It's got everything you wanted to know about Wing Commander 2 and more. Check it out. I could certainly use the views. One final thing to note is that I decided to play these expansions using the Kilrathi saga, which is an example of what we would nowadays call a remaster of the first 3 Wing Commander games. It comes with some cool new features, such as much better performance in Wing Commander 1 and the ability to turn your cockpit invisible while preserving your HUD, alongside some changes that could be considered side grades or downgrades, such as more realistic sound effects that can get really loud to the point of being grating with no option to reduce the volume. And then there's all the added bugs, like cutscenes that animate way too fast, or in the case of some of the scenes in these expansion packs, are missing music, or just straight up broken. So why do this to myself? Well, one of the improvements the Kilrathi saga makes is in the precision of the flight controls. See, there's this, let's call it a rivalry between gamepads and full-size joysticks going on in the comments of my videos. Long story short, for the first few videos I made, I used a gamepad, but now I have a joystick and I can compare the two. In the case of Wing Commander 2 for DOS, well, look, it's a very old game, and as a result, the controls for turning your ship are coarse is the best way to describe them. Enough so that whatever precision advantage a full-size stick has over a thumbstick doesn't really bear out in my experience. But the Kilrathi saga could be a different story. The whole reason that I went down this rabbit hole in the first place is that I loaded up the Kilrathi saga and tried it out on a lark, and was shocked by how good it felt to control my ship given the game's age. The smoothness and precision of the controls alongside some satisfying hit reactions convinced me to keep going, and my life just spiraled out of control from there. And the thing is, many of those issues with the Kilrathi saga are presentational in nature, and for me, gameplay is king. So, could it be that, if you're like me, those wonderfully smooth controls outweigh all the myriad issues introduced by these ports? I wasn't sure. One thing I am sure of is that those controls don't just feel good, they straight up give you an advantage. And going by my experience with the secret missions campaigns from the first game, I was going to need every advantage I could get. And hey, maybe this could be the opportunity for the full-size joystick to truly shine. And that's how I found myself watching these motor mouths go. Lucky for you, I can slow them down with the magic of editing. But maybe that's not the only thing that could be edited for the better. I happen to notice that the sound effects for Kilrathi Saga are individual WAV files sitting in one of the game folders. So what if I just opened the worst offenders in Audacity and reduced their volume? Could it really be that simple? Yes it could. Maybe now I'll be able to actually hear those missiles coming at me, or just, hear myself think.
I will return, human.
What are your plans for my squadron, Prince?
You will lead our glorious assault on the rebels at Gorakar.
If we are the first squadron to attack Gorakar, that will be suicide.
You question my orders, Khazra.
Yes, and I question why you are still in command of our battle fleet.
You dare to insult me.
You were responsible for the failure at Conthrax. You should have died for that.
Perhaps the Emperor still favors me because I have not tried to murder him. You will carry out my orders, Khazra. And if you do not, then you will die a traitor.
I guess if I'm supposed to buy that the Kilrathi can't tell her that the pilots of the ships they just destroyed weren't killed, the same could be true for us. Instead of being court-martialed for disobeying orders, Maverick has been promoted to colonel and handpicked for the Special Operations Unit, doing secret agent stuff for the rebelling Kilrathi colonies with Hobbs under the command of Paladin, which Maverick somehow hasn't put together until now. But before we can begin our new life as the Ethan Hunt of space, we've got some cleanup to do in the Enigma sector. To start things off, we get paired with Stingray and given P-64D super ferrets to take out on a patrol. What is there to say about the super ferret? It's a ferret with missiles. Moving on. One detail that I thought was pretty neat is now that the cat's out of the bag on them, your HUD gives a name to the stealth fighters. Straka. What's not so neat is how one of these Straka cloaked and then just never decloaked. It was still hanging around somewhere nearby, judging by the combat music and my autopilot telling me there are enemies near, but not where I could find it. Now, I can't say for absolute certain that this bug is exclusive to the Kilrathi saga, but I can say it never happened to me in the DOS version. It feels so good to fly the ships though, it's still worth it. Since I didn't want to accept letting that Straka live, I decided to test something I'd been wondering about. The new automatic landing system in this game is pretty lenient. You can be coming in pretty hot and it'll still land you safely anyway. But how far does it go? What if I go full afterburners into the Concordia? Will it still work then? Nope. I'm honestly kind of surprised. In the second mission, we run into a pair of Frolthras, which we can't do anything about since these dumbass Paul Blart mobiles don't have torpedoes, which leads immediately into the third mission, an honest-to-God fleet battle, with the Concordia duking it out with the two Frolthras while we take on their fighter escort alongside multiple other wingmates. It's really cool and encouraging that they managed to pull off something that feels genuinely different from anything we saw in the base game. This mission also introduces a new enemy type, the Gothri Heavy Fighter. It's another heavily armored bomber with 4 front guns and a rear turret. Because what, there weren't enough of those in the game already? Sure, why not? What's one more for the pile? They keep the new stuff coming for the next mission, where minefields make their return from Wing Commander 1. Just like in that game, they seem far less dangerous than asteroids, so eh. The really interesting part comes next, when after jumping to another system, we get jumped by ferrets with human pilots. You don't see that every day. Even though there are 4 of them, they're still easy pickings for the broadsword we get for this mission, which really drives home how the food chain works in this game. The real hard part came when I realized that instead of pointing me towards the jump point to get back home, my navigation computer instead targeted one of the nav points in that system, which the autopilot cannot handle. I was a little worried I was going to be lost in space until I figured out that you can manually target a nav point by clicking it on the map, which I didn't know you could do because it's never been required until now. Kilrathi Saga bug? Quite probably, but I can't say for sure that it doesn't happen in the DOS version. Anyway, with that crisis averted, Tolwyn isn't surprised about the ferrets, because a Confederation cruiser, the Gettysburg, had a mutiny recently near one of those rebelling Kilrathi planets. Something you may have noticed is that, although we've been playing Special Operations for a while now, we have yet to engage in any special operations. Well, about that, because of the Gettysburg situation, High Command delays our transfer to Special Operations, which Hobbs is justifiably unhappy about. But Maverick seems to be even more unhappy that Tolan wants to make contact with the Gettysburg to try to figure out what happened instead of killing everybody involved immediately. Which, I don't know, man. If Tolwyn is looking like the reasonable guy in the room, maybe tone it down a notch? Our mission is to fly to a designated point where our computer will automatically transmit a long-distance message to hopefully be intercepted by the Gettysburg, then investigate a distress call from a Kamek corvette. Maverick is, for some reason, still going on about how much he wants to kill everyone on the Gettysburg. This is just going to be your thing now, huh? Well, he kinda gets his wish, because this mission involves blowing up a lot of APs, but not before they're able to destroy the Kamek in a cutscene. It's notable that we get 2 wingmates along for the ride here, who are very helpful against the large numbers of enemy fighters, although you can tell that the engine wasn't built for this. The radio interface has no way of differentiating between multiple wingmates, so you just can't give any orders. Not that I mind most of the time. What I do mind is how often I notice I'm taking damage from behind when all the enemies are in front of me. I don't see any bogeys back there, do you? It's actually still a problem even when you only have 1 wingmate. Adding more just makes it worse. Maniac was infamous for this in the first game, but in the sequel, it's everyone. I think the devs must have noticed that most of the wingmates hardly ever got any kills and cranked their aggression up across the board, with the end result being pilots who admittedly do get kills far more often, but at the expense of becoming even more trigger happy than Maniac was in the first place. Wing Commander's combat is fast, chaotic, and happens at a very close range, so the more allied craft are involved, the easier it becomes to have a friendly fire incident. It takes a deft touch to avoid shooting your own guys, and the more of them there are, the more obvious it becomes that the AI has anything but. Space is starting to become crowded. After the mission, we see Stingray chatting it up with someone we haven't seen before about the mutiny, and Maverick tells them off for spreading rumors, because it's unprofessional. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to lecture other people on following the rules? Give me a break. The message was received and responded to, so we now know what's going on. When Kilrathi and the Netanya system rebelled, a convoy of Imperial Loyalist refugees tried to leave the planet on unarmed transports, and the commander of the Gettysburg ordered his pilots to open fire on them. Not wanting to commit an atrocity, the pilots refused, triggering a mutiny. The reason why we've been getting attacked is that the mutineers had a little mutinyception, splintering into two factions, one of which is interested in rejoining the Confederation, and one of which is not. And just to spice things up a bit, they also have access to a fancy new bomber called the Crossbow. We are to meet with a delegation from the Good Guy faction, led by a pilot who goes by Bear, and escort them back to the Concordia. It was very kind of Origin to call this a victory for me, even though Bear's ship was destroyed. And hey, it's a new background. This probably would have worked a little better for that one scene with Jazz in the base game. Bear explains that they captured Rigel Depot because they needed supplies, but didn't intend to kill anyone. However, one Colonel Ransom's team opened fire on some prisoners who tried to escape, resulting in a massacre and the schism, with Ransom and most of the senior officers on one side and some of the pilots led by a Lieutenant Colonel Pulma on the other. Tolwyn is concerned that the Gettysburg and Depot together would be a very tough nut to crack. Most of the pirates have, for some reason, decided to occupy the depot instead of the heavily armed warship, so he proposes sending someone to convince the Gettysburg crew to join our side. The smart play would be to send Bear, since they trust him, but protocol dictates that we keep him in the brig, and we all know how much Tolwyn loves protocol, so we get to do it instead. They give us a saber for this one, and I legitimately had more trouble taking on the pirate épées with this thing than I did with the épée, even though the saber greatly outclasses it on paper, just in case you needed a reminder of how much this thing sucks. It's a bit fraught, but Maverick manages to coax Pulma into letting him land and discuss the situation. In the brig, naturally. Getting a lot of mileage out of that background already. Too bad they didn't change the main menu to reflect this. They're willing to accept the pardon, but there's a snag. A Confed convoy apparently didn't get the memo about the supply depot and are headed to certain death. Maverick suggests refueling his ship and letting him take out the depot before that could happen, but Pulma has a better idea. Why not use the brand new crossbow bombers they've got collecting dust in their hangar bay? This ship kicks ass. It's basically like a broadsword, but better. A little faster, albeit still missing afterburners. A little more maneuverable. A lot more, actually. It lost the side turrets, but those were worthless anyway. What it gained in return is the most devastating front gun combo in the game. These babies absolutely shred through anything you point them at. They're so powerful they even break ITTS. When you have multiple projectile types with different speeds, it's a bit less accurate since it has to average them out, but it's not even trying here. Maybe a KS bug? I don't know, but with this much power, I don't even care. Really, the most important part is those gloriously protective bomber shields. An overpowered beast of a ship for all the same reasons as the broadsword. The crossbow carries 4 torpedoes, like a bomber should, but I didn't need to use any of them because my wingmates took the depot out before I could even try. It seems like the AI doesn't have to wait for a lock. Lucky them. Alright, now that the mutiny situation has been resolved, maybe we could do some Just kidding. We can finally get our secret agent on, starting by escorting the Bonnie Heather to Olympus Station. I guess we already got a little taste of what being a special operator is like simply by virtue of being friends with Paladin. We also get a name to put to that new face from earlier, Major Edmund, a communications specialist who will be working with us. Oh, and we're bringing the crossbow with us. I wouldn't have it any other way. Olympus Station means we're back at Gora-Kar, the Kilrathi colony that rebelled, and Paladin explains why. Inspired by Gora-Kar's example, 3 other colonies are following suit, which is potentially very bad for the Empire and very good for us. To counter this, the Empire is making a big show of retaking Gora-Kar to serve as an example to any would-be rebels out there. We're here to make sure that doesn't happen. Our first act of rebellion is to escort a freighter running guns to the Netanya system, picking up a friendly Relatha along the way. These expansion missions are where the issues with bomber shield regeneration really make themselves known. They tend to have more distinct encounters than the ones in the base game, and when I have a bomber, I usually opt to wait for the shields to fully top up in between each one, because it's tough out there, and I want to give myself the best chance of success, which leads to a lot of this. Back on Olympus, we learn from Major Edmund that the reason she doesn't like Maverick is that the coward of Conthrax Mang reminds her of a traumatic event in her past, when she incorrectly decoded a Kilrathi transmission and all 2,000 crew members of the TCS Kursk died as a result. Wait, she doesn't like Maverick? That's news to me. Now, that's a strange thing to have to explain, given we've only ever seen Maverick giving her crap up to this point, but more importantly, lady, did you not get the memo? The Tiger's Claw disaster was in no way Maverick's fault, and everybody should know that by now. Also,
you fucked up my face.
After that truly baffling exchange, it's time for our next mission. Hobbs has returned from his on-the-ground mission to Gora-Kar with a group of young human pilots who stand to serve as the backbone of the Confed's defense of the region, and Paladin wants us to show them how it's done, with an emphasis on keeping them alive over scoring kills. With a total of 6 friendly ships flying around every which way, this mission felt like walking on eggshells the whole way through, but I somehow managed to get all the way through it with 0 casualties on my first try, so maybe the kids are alright after all. Alright, time for some real spy stuff. Paladin's agents have learned of the location where a Kilrathi intelligence squad plans to drop off a data pod with plans for the invasion of Gora-Kar. If we can capture it, Edmund will decrypt it and replace its contents with an alternative plan that sends their fleet into our defenses. Whoa, hold on a second. You're Major Edmund? I thought this was simply one of 3 random faces you'd get when communicating with a carrier or station, but apparently it was Edmund all along. It seems we have met before, but I never once got the idea that she resented Maverick in any way, so I guess she just has an extremely professional work ethic. Anyway, we soon learn of a very small enemy strike fleet heading down the corridor established by our fake plans. Maverick expresses suspicion at the idea that the Kilrathi would commit so little to their attack, and soon after destroying the fleet, he's proven right in the form of 5 carrier groups bearing down on Gora-Kar. Paladin leaves for the Charm system to try to track the approach vectors of the incoming fleet, leaving us to defend Olympus from a fighter attack. As soon as that's over with, we get a call from Paladin asking us to come to him, because the Bonnie Heather's been attacked, leaving it unable to jump. The only reason he's been able to survive this long is that for reasons unknown, the Imperial Kilrathi have started fighting each other. So we come to the rescue, picking up a stranded Kilrathi pilot along the way. But not just any pilot. We managed to bag Prince Thrakoth himself. What are the odds, huh? The reason why he's in this predicament is that there was a coup d'etat attempt by Khosra. Khosra. Isn't that the Dr. Claw guy? Didn't I kill you? Well, anyway, he sends a message demanding we surrender Thrakoth to him, while Thrakoth demands a fighter so he can try to kill Khosra. Meanwhile, the Kilrathi saga is just completely falling apart at this point. Still worth it, though. As soon as we launch to go fight Khosra, we find out that the thing that always happens in sci-fi stories when the only thing preventing a prisoner from leaving their cell is a force field happens, and Throckoth heads off to face Khosra. What follows is a three-way battle. Princey Boy is scripted to always escape, and Khosra managed to escape me by circumstance, but with his coup in shambles, I doubt we'll be hearing from him anytime soon regardless. Racing back to Olympus Station, we learn that they've managed to fend off 3 of the 5 carrier groups, but are barely hanging on at this point, leaving us to take on the final 2, which are headed for the station now. Wait a minute. We'll fly the Sabers. Oh no.
Great! I'll grab my stuff!
There is no time. Your sword is enough.
This is easily the worst decision Maverick has ever made. After having a pretty rough experience with the secret missions campaigns for the first game, I was surprised by how reasonable Special Operations ended up being. It seems like after having made several Wing Commander campaigns, the designers had learned where the line between difficult and obnoxious was, and took care to avoid stepping over it, with one exception. That being this, the final mission of Spec Ops 1. This mission is kind of infamous. I knew about it even before I played the first game, because I'd happened to run across people talking about how legendarily ridiculous it was while looking up info on the series. It's basically the Kobayashi Maru of Wing Commander. So here's the deal. There's only one nav point, called Task Force. On the way to the Task Force, we run into 2 Sartha fighting Bear and his unnamed wingmate. This is obviously not the hard part. It's just a minor stumbling block, there to trip you up a little, waste your time, eat away at your soul. It's like goddamn Genichiro, back again with his bullshit when all I want to do is learn the real fight. Once that's handled, Bear and Co. join your squad and the real fun begins. 4 Gothri, plus the 2 Frother cruisers taking potshots with their antimatter guns. Now, you might think that having 2 additional wingmates would even the odds a little. Yeah, you'd think that, wouldn't you? That's because you're forgetting that the friendly AI in this game all behave like absolute maniacs, pun fully intended. The resulting skirmish is the stuff of nightmares. I tried thinning out the idiot squad a little beforehand. I tried boosting past the fighters and going for broke against the Frothras. I tried sending my wingmates at them. I tried a lot of things, and of course, I tried taking them on like normal. And tried, but I just couldn't make it happen. The thing is, even if you destroy all the fighters, which I did manage to do a few times, well, then it's time to pit whatever burning wreckage remains of your ship against both Fralthras. That's 4 torpedo runs in a row while being shot with antimatter. They've given us a special loadout with 4 torpedoes to make this possible. Theoretically possible. Maybe if I had a good ship, this would be reasonable, but a single antimatter shot is enough to render a pristine Saber half dead, and need I remind you, you cannot dodge them without breaking your torpedo lock. But I still have one last trick up my sleeve. According to the Wing Commander CIC guide, if you fail this mission but survive, it takes you to a different mission that gives you one last chance to win the campaign. This second chance mission looks promising. It's just you and Hobbs against a single Frothra, so it couldn't hurt to try. Except, for whatever reason, ejecting during this mission results in Maverick's death. I'm not about to give up that easily though. There's something I've heard about but never done before. Normally, if you ask for permission to land before completing your mission, they'll refuse. But if you fulfill certain conditions, they allow it. Conditions like destroying an enemy fighter, visiting a nav point, or taking heavy damage. So, if after getting half my ship blown apart while engaging the task force, I were to turn tail and run,
you are cleared to land.
Bingo! They let me land on the Concordia, and the Frothras spend the next 2 hours bombarding Gorakar from orbit. Sucks to be them. Well, it sucks to be me too, because while this mission might look better at first glance, it's actually harder. While it only has one encounter with a single Fralthra, that means fighting... Hold on, am I reading this right? 9 Gothries? 9? Jesus Christ. So, I gave up. At least, that's what I was thinking when I went to bed that night. The next day, I thought, why not go back to the winning path and try something? It's only 4 Gothries, they shouldn't be beating me that badly. Maybe the Fralthras are the problem. So what if I get their attention, then take the fight far enough away from the cruisers that they can't shoot at me anymore? And... hold on... did that hit? Okay... new plan. Start the fight, then immediately turn around and fly away at max speed, then switch to the turret and start blasting. The Gothries won't even try to dodge at this distance, making them trivially easy to hit. They'll fire back, but their shots can't reach me. So what's going on here? Well, the turret's neutron gun is supposed to be the shortest range weapon in the game, certainly shorter than the particle cannons and mass drivers the enemies are using. But you have to consider, I'm traveling away from their projectiles at 400 kilometers per second, while they're traveling towards mine at the same speed. In real life, projectiles we fired would inherit our velocity, cancelling out this effect, but even though missiles apparently do inherit velocity, for whatever reason, gun projectiles don't. The AI programmers evidently didn't account for the possibility of being able to hit an enemy from this far away, and so didn't design an appropriate response. Their loss, our gain. Finally, something the Saber's actually good at. That's the Gothries dealt with, but what about the Fralthras? We still have to do 4 torpedo runs against an enemy with an attack that can't be dodged without breaking our lock, that can kill us in 2 hits. Broken game? Well, if it weren't for the turret cheese, I probably would have left it at that. However, thanks to being able to reliably get to this point, I was able to experiment and figure out a viable strategy. So, the primary problem facing us here is those antimatter guns, right? Supposedly they can only fire those from the front. I say supposedly because, you'll see what I mean. The most obvious solution is to try to do your torpedo runs from behind them. But how do you even tell what direction they're facing relative to you when they look like this? Well, the best sign that they're looking right at you is if they send some antimatter your way. So, if that happens, you can boost past them, then quickly turn around and begin your run. You'll know you did it right if they fire a shot and it's way off. Except, sometimes they'll be right on target anyway. It can't be that they were able to turn fast enough. This strategy wouldn't even be possible if that were the case. Do they have multiple hard points? Good luck figuring it out from the sprite. According to the wiki, a Fralthra has 3 antimatter guns, which doesn't make any sense to me considering that they fire in spreads of 2. Do they have 3 sets of 2? I don't think they refer to any other guns that way. The only thing I know for sure is that if they fire straight at you, all you can do is dodge and start over again. Still, that's a reliable way to dodge the AMGs and eventually get your torpedoes off. You just gotta replicate it 4 times. What could go wrong? Well, a lot. Every run is going to put you in the hands of flak RNG. Better hope nothing essential gets damaged. Also, every time you have to get away from the AMGs, you're wasting fuel. On my winning run, I was almost completely out by the end, which would have been bad because you need that stuff to dodge the AMGs and get into position. But it held on for just long enough, which is why it was my winning run. Whew. With Gora Car saved, everybody celebrates, including Thrakoth, who tells dear old dad that it was all a cunning ruse to divert our attention away from the Deneb sector while they captured it. Sure thing, buddy. That's definitely something that wasn't gonna happen anyway. I'm on a roll here, so let's jump straight into Special Operations 2. We begin with a recap of Jazz getting captured, and hey, that's not what he said. In the original scene, he tried to claim that Maverick would need his help to prove his innocence, which made little sense. Surely the corroborated existence of stealth fighters would be more than enough to prove Maverick's case. They must have realized how dumb that was, because they retcon it to be about how Jazz is willing to sell out his Mandarin buddies at the drop of a hat, which is on brand for Jazz, I guess.
Lights, please. Now that we've seen the evidence from the flight recorder, this military tribunal has reached its verdict. Major Zach Jazz Coulson, you stand accused of murder and high treason. You are hereby pronounced guilty of all charges. For these crimes, you are sentenced to death.
This court cannot condemn me. Only history will decide if I'm a villain or a hero. And our history will be written by the Kilrathi.
Guards, take him away!
The Morningstar project is nearing the final stages of prototype testing. A squadron of test pilots is being transferred to the Concordia.
We must have that prototype. Bring me this Morningstar, even if you have to spill blood to get it.
Preferably.
Just as Maverick is leaving to get some R&R, he gets diverted to escort the freighter carrying Jazz to his execution, an inconvenience he is more than happy to accept. Unfortunately for him, they hit him with the old trolley problem. Just as we cross paths with two civilian freighters being attacked by Kilrathi, Mandarins hijack our escort and spring Jazz, while Maverick, goody two-shoes that he is too busy defending the civvies to do anything about it. Why does everybody keep calling him Jazz Coulson? Either his name or his call sign. Pick one. Nobody does both. Stop it. I guess Maverick's vacation has been cancelled because now it's time to patrol the Deneb sector, which the Concordia has just arrived at. Dude just can't catch a break. But never mind that. Maniac's back. And he's a goth now? Sure, why not? Personality-wise, he's been reimagined, or maybe just medicated, into a pretty chill dude who just so happens to be dangerously irresponsible and utterly convinced of his own brilliance. It's a fun combination. He's been doing well for himself, having gained command of the Wild Eagles, an elite squad of test pilots here to shake down the new Morningstar fighter that everybody's been talking about. So hot right now. Morningstar. It seems like this thing does need to be tested because one of Maniac's squad members, Captain Grimaldi, failed to make the jump here and is stranded, so he and Maverick head out to rescue her. Or Maniac asks to fly the Saber, which Tolwyn seemingly acquiesces to, but then in the actual mission it's Maverick and Stingray.
Hey, target practice!
Back on the deck, we learn that Grimaldi's call sign is Minx, and they brought in a different artist to draw some of the new characters in this one, but Minx in particular stands out as looking weird next to the old characters to me. Later, on the Observation deck, in between bragging about his exploits, Maniac gives us a little tease about the Morningstar's capabilities. Apparently it was built to some of his specifications. Whatever that means. In order to try to nail down these jump problems with the Morningstar, we're ordered to escort one as it does a test jump with some diagnostic equipment on board, which Maniac volunteers to pilot. While this is happening, we run into a Kilrathi freighter identified as the Gamel Gan, suffering from severe engine trouble. We're ordered to leave it be so a patrol can pick it up, and it actually is there, so you do need to leave it be, which I thought was a nice bit of interactivity. Among the crew captured from the Gamel Gan is a human, definitively proving what Confed Command had been strongly suspecting for a while, that the Mandarins are working directly with the Kilrathi. An interrogation of this Mandarin reveals that the Gan was ferrying supplies to a secret Mandarin base known as Ayer's Rock, which Paladin has heard of before, but doesn't know anything else about. Never mind that, because it's time to fly a test patrol with a whole squadron of Morningstars. Except us, of course, we get a broadsword. They really tease you with the Morningstar, don't they? Look, but don't touch. One pretty neat addition to Wing 2 that I haven't mentioned up to now is key combinations to perform commonly used radio commands. The radio interface is remarkably intuitive for its time, but it can be awkward to manually open the comms VDU, select a recipient, and then what you want to say to them in the middle of a battle, so these shortcuts are welcome. Or at least they would be welcome if they weren't strangely error-prone. At least I can confirm they are in the Kilrathi saga, surprise surprise. The issues I've had from attempting to use these range from nothing happening to causing the AI to behave very erratically. Or maybe it's not a bug. We do know Maniac is super proud of the Morningstar. Maybe he's just really excited to show it off. Afterwards, we get to meet the rest of the Wild Eagles over cards. In addition to Maniac and Minx, we have Talon, whose claim to fame is that he's fluent in Kilrathi, and Crossbones, who is essentially Maniac's protege, but comes off as a bit less amiable and a little more brutish. You know, it sure would be weird if a future Wing Commander game had a subplot about Maniac getting command of a squad for the first time and struggling with it, wouldn't it? Just a random thought, apropos of nothing. After a mission defending the Concordia from a surprise attack that feels a bit like filler, Maverick catches some flack from Talon and Crossbones about how he let Jazz escape. 'Cause Maniac never would have let that happen. Yeah, I'm sure he wouldn't have. It just would have involved solving that trolley problem a little differently. Next, we get orders to investigate a strange signal coming from a minefield that may be a data pod. Turns out, it's a bomb! Or so the cutscenes would have you believe anyway. I couldn't get it to actually explode in gameplay. Maybe it's another Kilrathi saga bug, but this smacks of the kind of thing that would be beyond what the mission scripting system in these games is capable of, so I don't know. Meanwhile, the Mandarins have been sending out propaganda broadcasts featuring Jazz Coulson, hijacking Terran freighters, and the Eagles, or at least Crossbones, continues to give Maverick shit about it. This whole thing seems like a lame retread of the base game, to be honest. Oh boy, everybody hates Maverick for a thing that wasn't his fault again. Hold that thought. You're a highly skilled pilot and an officer who follows orders? Who follows orders? I'm sorry, do you even know who you're talking to? Jesus Christ, Maverick, you've known him for what, like 2 days? A day or so later, Maverick is dismayed to find Minx back from a patrol earlier than expected and without her wingmate, which she explains is because they ran into some serious resistance and she was ordered to return early to prevent the Morningstar from falling into enemy hands. Maverick strongly disapproves of this, and when he learns that the wingmate and the one who gave the order is Angel, he rushes off to save her. What did I just say about following orders? They try to justify Maverick's little dalliance after the fact by saying, oh, him and Angel just haven't had the opportunity to spend any time together in a while because of work. Sure, whatever, man. You're just lucky what happens in special operations stays in special operations. The Mandarins have negotiated an exchange of 3 of their own for the crews of those hijacked freighters, and the terms say only 1 fighter can come to the exchange point. Tolwyn wants us to fly that fighter because there's reason to believe Jazz will be there, and he thinks we're the only one capable of taking him on. It's a good thing they gave us a broadsword because we run into a small fleet including a capital ship on the way to the exchange. And then when we actually get there, nothing happens? At first I was confused, thinking I did something to screw it up, but no, apparently you just go to the exchange point and then back to the Concordia, and somehow that means the exchange happened. It's very strange because the assets to make a quick and dirty cutscene denoting that the exchange happened were there. All you would need is a standard shot of Maverick in the cockpit talking to some guy about how they're doing it. It feels uncharacteristically unpolished for this game. Oh, and Jazz was a no-show. The Wild Eagles are about to go out on patrol, but something's off. Minx is already leaving with one of the Morningstars, but she's not supposed to fly anywhere until tomorrow. She's a Mandarin spy, and she just escaped with a Morningstar prototype. Apparently, they're just used to the Concordia's flight deck blowing up now, because it's only going to take 25 minutes to get it back up and running. Crossbones died in the blast, but Sparks and Talon survived with injuries, in case you were wondering. The jump drive problems still haven't been fixed, so Tolan reasons that Minx must be planning to meet with a carrier ship to get her out of there. He sends us and Maniac after her and the remaining Morningstars. Finally! Now that we've arrived at the fireworks factory in Chekhov's starship, Maniac tells us what he meant by it being built to his specifications. The Maniac difference, if you will. It's got a tactical nuke on board. It's called the Mace, and it's honestly kind of underwhelming, at least when used the way he suggests. You're supposed to launch it into the middle of an enemy fighter squadron, then set it off with your guns to take them all out at once, but the blast radius doesn't seem to be big enough to make this at all practical. Maybe it's the Kilrathi saga acting up again. It's getting increasingly hard to tell. The rest of the ship is anything but underwhelming. It's a relatively quick and maneuverable heavy fighter with torpedoes, much like the Saber. Unlike the Saber, its front guns consist of 3 particle cannons in a nice tight grouping. It might not have as much raw firepower as the crossbow's front guns, but it's more efficient and much easier to aim thanks to being 3 of the same projectile traveling at the same speed, which happens to be fast. You can just tear through even the toughest fighters like they're nothing when you're on a roll. As for defense, while it doesn't have bomber shields, it's the closest you're going to get on a fighter, with about 50% more shields and armor than the Saber. The only thing it's missing is a rear turret, meaning no turret cheese, but everything else about the Morningstar makes it good enough to take on anything the game can throw at you in a fair fight, so why bother? I like it. Unfortunately, we don't find Grimaldi, who I can't help but notice doesn't get to keep her call sign. Apparently she must have gambled on her jump drive working and won. It's okay though, because Scorpion, an undercover agent working for Paladin, managed to get a transmission off from Ayers Rock, enabling us to figure out its location. Paladin needs us and 2 other officers to go on a mission with him to take it out. Time for the actual special operation to begin. The first candidate for this suicide mission is Maniac, who laments that with Crossbones dead, Talon unable to fly anymore due to injuries, and Minx a traitor who handed the Morningstar over to the Kilrathi, his career in the military is pretty much over. Well, at least he's got plenty of free time now. Sometime later, Maverick and Maniac are ordered to take their Morningstars and rendezvous with Paladin, who's been busy. There's an asteroid field on the way there, and I got a little impatient. We're almost out of it. What if I just tap the afterburners a little bit? Get there fast. Yeah, don't ever do that. After carefully navigating the asteroid field, we find Paladin in a Kilrathi freighter called the Grimalkin, a rechristening of the Gamel Gan, the one we brought in after it ran into engine trouble earlier. It's got everything we need for our little excursion. Fuel, provisions, electronic screening for masking 2 Morningstar fighters, and a complete Confed interior refitting. What does that mean? Well, this. Very clever game. 10 out of 10. The second lucky winner turns out to be Talon, who jumped at the chance to get back at the people who killed Crossbones and maimed him. As soon as we refuel, we're to launch again to escort the Grimalkin to a jump point that'll take us to Ayers Rock. I sure hope it's okay that Maniac got his prototype ship blown up. I guess it's fine. Ayers Rock Security issues a countersign challenge in Kilrathi, which Talon is able to answer thanks to his one identifiable trait. Except the whole thing was pointless, because Scorpion sends us a message warning that the Mandarins detected our electronic screen and sent 2 wings of fighters to investigate, which we of course have no choice but to kill. As the Mandarins search for the source of the transmissions, Scorpion risks another one to tell us that all of the Mandarin leaders are very conveniently on Ayers Rock for some kind of summit before being cut off by a jamming device. Talon asks the Concordia for reinforcements, but is told they can't help because they're under attack, but are unable to launch fighters because they just sealed off their flight deck, I guess for more permanent repairs? That seems bad, but Paladin reasons that we're too far away to do anything about it. Whatever happens is going to be over with by the time we get there, so we might as well make the best of our situation here, which starts with defending the Grimalkin while it makes for the nearest jump point. This mission is notable for having enemy sabers in addition to the usual Kilrathi fare. Well, they look like sabers, and they're called sabers, but they sure act like morning stars. Notice the distinctive triple particle cannon shots and the lack of a tail gunner. Not sure what's going on there. It's also notable for once again pitting us against two Frothra cruisers at once, although curiously, it doesn't really have the same infamy of Spec Ops 1's final mission. Hold that thought while I try something out. So you're telling me that I could just launch this thing at any capital ship without needing to lock on, and that ship will instantly blow up? Maniac, you goddamn idiot! Why didn't you lead with that? You're a genius! We only get one mace, so we gotta deal with the other Frothra the old-fashioned way. But the Morningstar has enough shields to do this safely, so it's no big deal. It's amazing how differently things can go when they give you a ship that isn't gutter trash. Talon receives another call from Scorpion, who says he's found a safe place to transmit from for a while, and that the Mandarins are starting to evacuate Ayer's Rock since they're convinced that the Concordia is coming for them. To which Talon stupidly replies, "I wish that was true," before the guy pointing a gun at the back of Scorpion's head gloats a little and then executes him. Ah yes, got him with the old...
Because you just told me, Fox Boy.
They can trace our signal to figure out where we are, and we aren't getting away anytime soon in this slow-ass freighter, so the only choice is to turn around and try to take on the fleet they're sending our way, and then Ayer's Rock head on. We probably should have just done this in the first place. The 2 Kamiks they send are a joke, but the 6 Morning Sabers aren't, or at least they shouldn't be. And yet I got them all first try. It really goes to show how much of a difference the ship they give you can make. Even though they have 6 of what is effectively the same ship, the AI just can't take advantage of it the way a half-decent player can. Meanwhile, I would really struggle to do the same thing with a Saber. As for Ayer's Rock... What the fuck?! Meanwhile, the Concordia deals with its own problems without us, for once. It's not quite over yet, though. Aren't we forgetting someone? We get a message from Minx. Oh, so she's Minx again? But not Minx Grimaldi, just Minx. Sitting in a rapidly deteriorating escape pod, requesting that we kill Jazz for her because he left her for dead. He took the Morningstar, and that's a one-seater, so yeah, that checks out. So Maverick and Maniac take off to finish things, except Maniac's ship immediately stalls out, leaving us to take on Jazz alone, which is weird because you think it would happen at the jump point, but oh well. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but they should have given Jazz some wingmates. It really doesn't seem like he'd be above it. I praised the AI in my Wing 1 video for good reason, but it has its limitations, which add up to just not being capable of matching a player one-on-one. If you're gonna send this game off, do it with a bang. All's well that ends well. Except, of course, we once again learn that it was just according to Keikaku. Yeah, sure, okay. Story-wise, these expansions make the base game look like a masterpiece. They're each split up into 2 mini-episodes of about 8 missions apiece, and at the pace this game delivers its story, that's just not enough time to get things like character beats across. Like, go ahead and name any aspect of Bear, Crossbones, or Talon's character that wasn't established in their introduction scenes, or explain what exactly Major Edmund added to the story. Minx and Maniac stand out as having a little more going on. Minx in the sense that she plays an active role in the story, moving the plot forward with her actions, but we don't really learn anything about her as a character, such as, but why though? I feel like they owe us at least that. Maniac has the opposite problem, where unlike the other characters, we actually do spend a decent amount of time interacting with them, and his charmingly vapid personality does shine through in various ways. He just doesn't exert any agency over the story, but maybe that's simply reflective of his character, waiting for Maverick to do all the work so he can swoop in and take credit. You know what? I'll give him at least that. They did a good job with Maniac. Other than Maniac, though, we end up with this sort of minimum viable product of a story that provides a series of plot points serving as an excuse to go shoot some stuff in space, but little more than that. It's also strangely derivative of the base game, to the point where it feels like treading water sometimes. Oh boy, everybody hates Maverick for stupid reasons again. Oh no, there's a mysterious traitor on the ship, again, who sets off another bomb on the flight deck. Another one, really? And it ends with a duel against Jazz, again. Something interesting about these expansions is that a number of the characters featured in them are actually present in an early draft for the base game story, but were cut from the final game. It makes me wonder if perhaps some of the scenario ideas were taken from the cutting room floor as well. Then it would make a little more sense that Edmund and Crossbones are such Maverick haters, because in the context of the base game story, they would have good reason to dislike the coward of Conthrax Mang. All of this hullabaloo about a traitor would seem a lot less redundant if these events were happening during the original traitor's reign of terror, namely Jazz. Speaking of Jazz, did you notice that he doesn't do a damn thing in this story before the very end? Kind of seems like he was just shoved in there at the beginning and end to give Maverick and the player a goal to chase. Well, if all this Mandarin business were to take place during the events of Wing 2, culminating in our original duel with Jazz, that would feel a lot more natural, wouldn't it? I don't have any definitive proof of this, but it would certainly explain a lot. But how much does a video game story really need? It's a question I found myself asking in the past for reasons totally unrelated to this video, but it seems relevant here. Not how much it can do, how much does it need to do in order to fulfill its purpose? The purpose of most video game stories is to provide a context for the gameplay. For as much as people like to claim that they only care about gameplay, pure gameplay on its own is never enough. It needs to be a part of something else. That something else doesn't have to be story, it could be a progression system or a leaderboard, but usually it's a story explaining how what you're doing is part of some greater whole. The story in the first Wing Commander tried to provide that context, but didn't do a very good job of it. It's all about saving the Vega sector from the Kilrathi Empire, but I didn't know anything about the Vega sector, and barely anything about the Kilrathi, certainly not enough to get emotionally invested in what happens to them. The Spec Ops stories are noticeably less ambitious than the base story of Wing Commander 2. They almost totally dispense with things like character development or foreshadowing or mystery building or trying to amount to any kind of discernible theme. The base story, as awkward as it could be, at least had some semblance of all of those things, but did it need to? You might be disappointed by this answer, but probably not. Jazz may have been hastily shoved into the beginning and end of Spec Ops 2 despite having nothing to do with 90% of the events in between, but does it really matter? I know that guy. He sucks. If you want me to kick his ass again, I'll do it gladly. Which is all to say that despite being dramatically worse than the base game, the story in Spec Ops 1 and 2 was still enough for me to enjoy my time with them. It did enough to support the gameplay, which for its part was more than able to handle the heavy lifting. I was a bit trepidatious coming into Spec Ops for the first time due to my experience with the secret missions campaigns for the first game, which cranked up the difficulty to the extreme using the most frustrating tactics available, like expecting you to take on scores of the best enemy ships in the game with the worst player ships available. To my relief, the Spec Ops campaigns don't take this approach at all. Instead, they're more like the culmination of all the institutional knowledge about mission design for these games up to this point. It's still challenging, pitting you against larger numbers of tough enemies than the base game did, but they take care to avoid the problems common to the most frustrating missions of the last 4 campaigns, so it never made me want to stop playing the way secret missions did. With one notable exception, but hey, 31 out of 32 ain't bad. They're also really inventive, continually finding ways to coax new tricks out of a system that is not quite as limited as I thought. Stuff like repurposing Confed ships as new enemy types was particularly inspired. That's using every part of the Buffalo. Very nice. Both campaigns combined come out to roughly as long as the base game, and sum up as, dare I say it, a better time. Definitely check both Spec Ops out if you enjoyed Wing Commander 2 but avoided them for whatever reason. Just watch out for that last mission in the first one, and don't use the Kilrathi saga to do it. It should be beyond obvious now that it's not worth it. Although, something that didn't occur to me until after I recorded and edited most of this is that playing the Kilrathi saga now at such a remove from its original circumstances makes it easy to forget that the Special Operations campaigns were not on the disc. The missing music I mentioned way back at the start isn't actually a bug per se. When George Oldjay was reorchestrating the music tracks, he didn't bother with the ones that were exclusive to the expansions because they were never intended to be part of the package to begin with. The Kilrathi Saga ports of Special Operations and the secret missions were given as free downloads from Origin's website. Unfortunately, the Wayback Machine didn't index the page, so I can't see what Origin themselves had to say about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were offered in a sort of semi-official, at-your-own-risk capacity. So it's not completely fair to judge the Kilrathi saga by the issues found in these expansions, but by the same token, we can criticize it for not including them in the first place, leading to our current unfortunate situation. All I can say with certainty is that you should stick to the DOS versions. And the final word on joysticks is, don't worry about it. Is the joystick better for aiming than a thumbstick in the Kilrathi saga? Maybe a little? In my original gamepad playthrough, I made it all the way to the final mission of Spec Ops 1 before giving up and moving on to Wing Commander 3. The joystick wasn't what made the difference this time, though. It was discovering turret cheese. The thing is, when you play the Kilrathi saga, you're already enjoying far more precision than anyone who played the DOS version back in the day had access to, even if you're using a thumbstick. So again, don't worry about it. Well, would you look at that? We've reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, perhaps you might consider helping to fund the creation of future videos like it on Patreon or Ko-fi. You can get your name in the credits, just like these fine folks you can see on the screen now. And I'd like to give an extra special thanks to Aaron Clark, Alarmed Response, Erica Simmons, Isaac Hampton, Jomenthan, Julius BMT Coter, Justin Talbot, Line Array, Regular Casanova, and Puke Skywalker, formerly 410,757,864,530 gay cops. Another cool thing you can do on the Patreon is vote on which game I should cover next. In the interest of keeping things simple, this voting is going to remain exclusive to Patreon for now, but what you can do on Ko-fi is support me for as little as $1 a month, which is impractical on Patreon due to back-end fees, so if the minimum price was holding you back, there you go. Speaking of the vote, the people have spoken, and so my next video will be Prehistory, or some title to that effect. It'll be a somewhat less in-depth than usual exploration of multiple space sims that came before Wing Commander, such as Spacim, Star Raiders, Star Luster, Elite, Space Rogue, and if you know of another game that gives you free control of a spaceship in 3 dimensions that came out before 1990, feel free to let me know. By the way, if you're wondering if I read your comments, the answer is yes. Unless it was a reply to an existing comment, in which case it's maybe, since the page that shows them all to me, which I find quite addictive, doesn't bump the old ones up if they get a reply. So yeah, I can't reply to everyone because that would suck up an even more unhealthy amount of time, but I see you, probably. Anyway, next video, pre-Wing Commander Space Sims, hopefully in less than 6 months from now.
Where the hell are you?